Well, greetings. Thanks for joining us today on a succession workshop. This is a three-part series. So I had a light bulb moment. Actually, it was a series of light bulb moments, and it all kind of happened within about a 1 week period. First, I was talking to a beauty brand executive, and she mentioned to me that there were 8 salons in a particular metro region, a top 10 region, not one of the top 5 regions in the country, but a top 5 region where there had 8 very strong businesses in that community that were actively expressing angst about their worry about their business making it to the next generation. No plan, very little optimism, and it seriously was considering a path that ultimately resulted in essentially turning in the keys. That was one. Number two is I was received an email, and the email essentially was from somebody we're acquainted with, and they sent us an email just essentially saying, we are closing our doors. And it was not necessarily due to financial failure. It had to do more with burnout was a big part of it, and really no likely opportunity for the owner to have anyone else carry the load other than her. Then I had another phone call from someone said that a particular chat was very active in terms of owners really expressing what's next for them in terms of their succession plan. And so this light bulb moment was, okay, I've sort of heard enough. I had this sudden realization, enlightenment or inspiration, and thought, a lot of these situations are either preventable, in the case of a salon closing, and also there is hope and there is a path for those that are willing to put in some effort to monetize their business and to see their legacy make it to the next generation, continuing an impact and income for them and whoever their successor is. So anyway, so basically, I've been teaching I'll go through my background here in a little bit, but this prospect of closing is just something that's very disturbing. So that led to other examples that really are very tangible. Here's an example of Lucinda Riley. And by the way, you may or may not be seeing my slides. That's okay. I'll speak to them. And thanks for joining us too. I neglected to mention that. I appreciate your precious attention and time today, whether you're participating live or listening to the recording. But this is Lucinda Riley. And Lucinda Riley, I had met many, many years ago. And her daughter, Lisa, showed up at our conference last year under the name of Lucinda Riley. And I said, "You're not Lucinda." She said, "That's right. I registered under my mom's name." Well, Lisa went on to tell me that Lucinda was in the process of hanging it up. She was closing the salon, not monetizing it, and it was basically going to be abandoned. Lisa, who lived on the other coast, because Face Value is located in Virginia, decided that she wasn't going to let that happen, the daughter. So Lisa made a major life decision and said, "I'm not going to let that happen." And she moved to Virginia and now is running the business with her mom. And as it turns out, Lisa's daughter is now in the business. So this business was likely to end after one generation. It's now on to the second generation, and there's actually a possibility for it going to the third generation. So I think there's a lot of hope, and I think there's a lot of great examples of people that were in a situation where they really didn't feel like they had a path, but yet there is a path, there is a possibility. And our goal, or my goal, and working as a succession educator, is to have all parties be in an even better place in the future than they are now. That is really the purpose behind succession work, at least that what I'm involved with. Now, notice the word succession, and embedded in that word is success. And one of the things that we like to do is we like to highlight successes, because successes give us a potential roadmap. And that's why case studies are so example. So anyway, this is the first of a 3-part series, and we're doing this all in the month of May. And we decided to dice these out into bite-sized chunks. These sessions will last anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes with some time for some Q&A at the end. Today's session is mainly about myths and traps and general things you should know about selling your business. May 15th, we're going to get into the subject of valuations, how much your business is worth, understanding valuations. And I do notice that several people that have signed up for this are existing clients, former clients, have recently been to a succession workshop or went to an exit workshop I taught in the past. I will tell you that the May 15th session around valuations does include new information as a result of a new alignment we have with a valuation firm. And I do have some very interesting things on the subject of valuations that haven't been shared before. Then May 29th, our final session at the end of the month, we'll go through the subject of readiness, which it all boils down to readiness. And when we get to that subject, I think what's most unique about what we teach is many talk about business and owner readiness, which are two separate silos. Just because the business is ready doesn't mean the owner's ready, and just because the owner's ready doesn't mean the business is ready. But we add a third dimension to that, and that is buyer readiness, because most of the transitions that we see in the professional beauty industry, which is primarily made up of micro businesses under 5 million of revenue, in many cases, the buyer is a key employee. So unlike other industries where buyer readiness isn't really, or the owner is not really involved in buyer readiness, in many cases they are. And that's why I think it's very important to look at readiness from not just business and owner readiness, which is what the traditional exit planning community focuses on, but let's not forget about buyer readiness. So a little bit about my background, just very, very brief. For those of you that don't know me, I started my career out as a CPA. I became a salon owner. So I was a salon owner for 6 years. I've also been in distribution, manufacturing, retail, education. I'm primarily, most of my career in the professional beauty industry, from start to even current, is as a financial educator. And that's where my true passion is. And that's making economic empowerment available for the entire industry, cradle to grave. I also work as an advisor. I like to think of myself as an industry advocate. I have worked with academic institutions, including UMass Boston. I'm active in data and research projects, and I am a podcast host to something called Light Bulb Moments, which I encourage you to sit in on, because pretty much every week or every other session, we do have something on the subject of succession, including a lot of guests. So feel free to join us on Light Bulb Moments. It's live Wednesday, 10 a.m. Central Time. It's also recorded on YouTube and listed as a podcast. A little bit about the Qnity Institute and the venture that we're most active in today. It's about economic empowerment through data and financial education, and from that becomes economic empowerment. Truly, if you boil it down, and why I do what I do in terms of offering a webinar like this is, I truly, truly want to be of service and help create greater economic empowerment for those that want to go, or those that want to let go, and at this point really don't have a path, need some inspiration, need some advice, need some guidance. That's really what it's about, is economic empowerment for existing owners as well as the upcoming generation of owners. As far as succession work, I've taught a succession workshop at multiple conferences. I've advised over 50 clients. I've created a workshop called Succession. It's relatively new. It replaces our previous work. Also, we've collected assessment data from over 50 owners. We've also started to create or gather our own valuation data, which I have not seen in the beauty industry. We also have vetted resources. We like to lean very heavily on case studies, data, and stories. And I'm a big advocate for salons making it to the next generation. And I love key employee transfers, but it is not the only option. Some of this is from a body of work called Succession, which we go through what to know, how to plan, and what to do, with some supplementary sections that deal with valuation, technical advisors, and transactions. Case studies. I love case studies, what I mentioned. There's just a few of them that I like to highlight. One is from Carrie Bennett and then Anna Johnson, a tremendous story that's full of about 10 to 15 different lessons. And that's why I've had them at our last couple classes, either live or in person or virtual, because their situation touches on so many different things that occur the beginning, the middle, end of a transition. And fortunately, it was a very successful transition for both parties. And I think that that is actually part of our curriculum. There's also great examples also of other case studies like Samuel Cole Salon, how they sold to 3 owners. And this lesson really, there's a lot of lessons in this one too. And then also an example of a succession situation where Penny Veach and Lori Sinberg were partners. Lori decided that she really wanted to let go, and she wanted to let go from being an owner. And that's a great example of a succession of an owner that wanted to let go but didn't really want to go from the business. So she sold her ownership to Jerica, who happened to be Penny's daughter. So there's so many case studies and examples of how people have navigated through just about every situation you can imagine. Before I go any further, I do want to get to a general disclaimer here. This is for education. It's not a substitute for any professional advice. Each of your situations is different and unique. Please use common sense when applying this education and the case studies. Okay, so first of all, what's at stake? Well, what's at stake is, for most, this could be the most important financial decision and transactions you will ever make in your lifetime. The stakes are very high. And in many cases, what we're looking at is 6-figure type decisions, usually at least, sometimes 7 figures. And reminder, who are your stakeholders? Family, your current and future generation, staff and their families, clients, of course, the community, vendors, industry, and so there's a lot at stake here. So let's go through some common owner myths and traps. And I've shared some of these in the past. Some of these are updated because this is not static. This is dynamic. The first one is that the whole process of getting ready to sell your business, bring on a partner, one myth is it won't be emotional, and that isn't a myth. It will be very emotional. Carrie Bennett, who I mentioned earlier, she and I both recall the very first conversation, and she wanted a little bit of guidance. And we were about 5 minutes in the conversation, and she started bawling and started to really hit her that, well, what's going on here? I mean, this is my legacy. This is my life. And I mean, all the different wondering. And so it is an emotional process. And I think that that's important to note and honor at the very beginning. Number 2 is myth, and this is a big one, is that you have time. And I've recently had some conversations with some very, very well-known and very successful business owners. You know who they are. I'm not going to mention their names, and there's a lot of them. And, ultimately, they express a great deal of confidence in their ventures. And then I asked the question, well, what's your succession plan? What would happen if you got sick? What would happen if something happened to you or some catastrophic thing? Have you started to prepare? Have you started to set things up for the next generation so that that torch easily could be passed on? So that's just one example. It sounds like really a harsh type example to share, but the myth of you having time is a really important one. And one of the things that I've learned, and for the record, I'm a lifelong learner, and I have continued to learn on transition strategies and plans, et cetera, and I continue to do so at the day, as we go here. But one observation I've had recently is that if I were to use a general rule of thumb, I would say 3 years is about an average amount of time for readiness. When you really break it down, though, that could vary quite a bit. Some people are already ready, and that process can go relatively quickly. Others, they're in a long-term trajectory. And so, but this process does take time, and especially if you want to have the position, be in a position where your business is sold at a price and in a scenario that you're comfortable with, so that you're proactive and not reactive. So you cannot start too early in succession planning. And this one, I will tell you this one, in updating my recent course, I went back to about like 20 clients, and I interviewed all of them. Interviewed them about price, the multiple that was used for the transaction. And then I asked them, I said, what are your key lessons? And I would say that 2/3 of them, at least 2/3 of them, maybe even all of them, said start early, start now. I wish I would have started a little bit earlier. So that's universal. Number 3 is a myth is that you need one advisor, and that's not the case. What many do is they pick what's rated as their most trusted advisor. In many cases, it's the CPA, and feel like their existing CPA is the one advisor that they will need in order for them to successfully move into a state of readiness. You will need multiple advisors. You absolutely will need a CPA, in particular to address tax matters. You certainly will need legal counsel. There are contracts involved and advice that's needed. You certainly will need someone that will help you with wealth management in the case that you will obtain some additional wealth from a transaction, which is what we very much hope. There's also other advisors that are needed, such as insurance, et cetera. But this idea that this is going to be guidance is going to come from one individual is just not realistic. And it's very important to approach it from a team perspective. Another myth is that you are dealing with just the buyer. You are not dealing with just the buyer. And an example of a key employee, you are dealing with the buyer and the buyer's family, whether it's in the case of a spouse, a partner, whatever. Oftentimes, parents might get involved, an uncle, an aunt, a cousin, a neighbor, so a conversation that you might have directly with the buyer is going to be repeated, and it's going to be brought over to other people. So one of the things to understand up front is that because this thought of your business being transitioned to the next generation is going to be, I already mentioned how many stakeholders are involved. Well, that's true for the buyer. The buyer has a lot of stakeholders. So that's an important one. Another myth is that you should provide all the financing. It is common for an owner to provide some seller financing, especially if it's a key employee, but we don't recommend that the owner provide all the financing if that's a route. Skin in the game is very, very important for a future success of a transition. Another myth, this is number 6, is that communication will be clear. Communication will not be clear. It'll be inconsistent. There will be interruptions. There will be delays, and there will be confusion. And there are several reasons for that. Part of it is that this is not something that in most cases the buyer and seller deal with every day. And even terminology can be confusing. Words matter, and we teach that in our class. What are the words that are used when we're dealing with succession planning? There's terminology that people use and metrics and what have you. And it's just important to understand that communication can and often will be confusing, inconsistent. There'll be gaps, and it can be frustrating. And it's just to be prepared for communication over a period of time that will be that will get clearer and clearer, but it does take work. This is a big one. Number 7, there won't be false starts. It's very possible there will be false starts. In the case of Carrie, I don't know that I would necessarily use the word false starts, but I think it is appropriate. Before Anna was the business owner, there was two other parties that Carrie was in discussion with, and they ultimately didn't result in a transition. I've seen many cases where an owner put a lot of AT&M, attention, time, and money, into a potential buyer, and found out that it never made it to the finish line and was exhausted, too exhausted to start it again. It's better to go into it saying that it might be 3 times the charm, but ultimately it's worth it at the end. And Carrie will attest to that as she's happily on to the next act in her life and is happily able to see that her business being run by a very competent person that she's still close with. So expect potential false starts, and expect that persistence is going to be very important, and perseverance. Number 8, rants will help. Rants about the state of the industry, the workforce, the lack of this, the lack of that will not help. And it's unproductive. Even some of the things that I've already mentioned, if they become rants about the false start or lack of communication or dealing with third parties, staying focused on the prize is really important. And in many cases, an owner has exhausted herself or himself with expressing frustrations to the point of being paralyzed. And then finally, number 9, and that is I'm adding this one to the list, and that is that one myth is that size doesn't matter. Size does matter. Size matters. When I'm speaking to specifically is the size of the transaction. And I'll give you a few very specific examples that really address some questions that I get all the time. One has to do with business brokers. Well, business brokers are in many cases a viable option, but in many cases, business brokers are not interested in deals that are less than $1 million sale price. And in many cases, that might even be low. So size does matter when it comes to using business brokers. Another example where size matters is I often get a question about, hey, I want to sell my business to my entire staff. I want to do an ESOP. An ESOP, for those of you that don't know, that is it's called an employee stock ownership plan. It's a highly regulated. It's something that has certain tax aspects to it. And many people say, I want to do an ESOP. Well, here's another example where size does matter, because in most cases, an ESOP is not an option, because for an ESOP to really be, because of all the compliance and annual reporting, communication, etc., ESOPs are very expensive, and usually there needs to be at least $1 million of profitability per year to even consider an ESOP. So these are 9 different examples of certain myths that ultimately result in traps for people as they look at succession planning. So I'm going to continue on a little bit longer here. I've got some other things to share with you today. And, you know, I want to give you some tangible things that can be done to start the process. And the exit planning community, and there is a community of exit planners, it's a new discipline, along with disciplines that lawyers and accountants, et cetera, many of them now have a specialty in transition planning, just because of the tsunami of small businesses that will move into transition over the upcoming years, as all baby boomers in a very short number of years will reach the age of 70. So there will be a lot of businesses that move into transition, and owners don't know what they don't know. Now, these are very smart owners, like many of you, but if you're not doing this every day, many will say that, oh, they have a plan. But we might see that often as misguided confidence that's based upon a misunderstanding of what goes into a plan. Because really, to do a successful transition, you want to be looking at this from multiple angles, which is, again, why we need a team. Estate planning comes into this, tax planning comes into it, evaluation of your different transition options goes into a plan, business valuation, of course, contingency plan, personal financial plan, et cetera. So big advocate of really looking at the term plan and then really breaking that down to make sure all your bases are covered. Seller succession options. One of the things that we have done is we've really classified individuals in fitting under one of three buckets. And that's an oversimplification because some might really be going through a process. So let me give you an example. There are those out there that are clearly in a grow mode, and they are not interested in letting go. They're not interested in going. They're in expansion mode. They're adding locations. They're potentially buying locations. They're expanding their existing space, and they are looking forward. In the back of their mind, they might be looking at a transition plan, but perhaps they're a stage in life, and then also a stage in their business model where they just want to grow. There's a really big group, and this is a myth too, that succession planning is only for those that want to have a full transition out of their business. No, succession planning also is helping those let go. Letting go is really what the owner that sent that email to us that basically said, I'm closing our doors. She would have continued her business probably if she had a partner. And she just felt the load. And I'm a big example. I'm a big advocate for partnerships. Also, on the other side of the breath here, say that partnerships must be approached with great caution and must be done deliberately, and there is risk. But I do believe that a seller succession option for many is just letting go. And in many cases, letting go can go through a methodical way of just cutting back on certain activities. But letting go also could be bringing in a partner so that you don't feel alone, and which is, I would call, a partial transition. And then there's those that are just in a go mode, and they're just ready for what's next, excited about what's next, or in many cases, just burned out, or at a stage in life, want to spend more time with family, want to spend more time doing this, doing that. And I'm going to get to succession why next. And so here's a really great step for you. And as we move into wrap up here, is if you're not familiar with the Qnity 9 grid, it's one of our grid-based tools, and it's used to really get things out of your head and down on paper to help you get unstuck. And one of the activities we go through, and I'll share it with you, it's quite simple, is to just simply take out a 9 grid and identify what's your why. Ultimately, you're going to have to get to that. And the sooner you get to that, the better. And what your why can vary quite a bit for people. Maybe it's just the why is just burned out, like running out of batteries. You just running out of steam, and it's just, ready for what's next. Others is more time away, more time at the beach, more time to experience travel destinations. Next is pursue a different degree or another field as a why for other people. A why could be health related. I've had several situations that were a little bit more crisis orientated, where the owner had some serious health issues and everything got escalated. And so a why could be that health is a reason to accelerate and create a need for a transition plan. Family, friends, more time with grandchildren, more time with children, more time with spouse, very, very big one. And, so then there's also just hobbies or things that, you just want to spend more time doing, like gardening. Like Carrie Bennett, hers was being more involved with her local zoo, doing just things that fulfill you. There's also travel. And then there's also other passions. I know of a salon owner that also is he's a drummer in a band, and he travels all over the place, and that really made him tick, and he was kind of just tired of salon ownership. So not up to us to say what your why is. The thing is, the why is very personal, and it could be a combination of all the above, could be something quite different. But I do think it's a great next step, and a step that can really help you identify, because you do need a team. You're going to need a team that will help you with succession-related strategies, advice, whatever. And you also need the team that you have right now to help bring this business into the next generation. So the more clear you are on the why, the more specific you are, the more you can approach this with what's next and what you're excited about in the future. I think the more the process will be fulfilling, and it's going to give you that motivation. All right, so that is session number 1. A few things you should know about selling your business, some myths and traps. Next week, we're going to get into how much your business is worth, getting into valuations. And then May 29th, we're going to go into business and owner readiness. Now, when it relates with business readiness, one of the things that we do is we have 9 grids, and I'll share what I can given the amount of time we had on just some of our 9 grids that address business readiness, owner readiness, and buyer readiness. We're also going to introduce 13X, which is a way to really create a very specific plan, whether it's 13 quarters out, and I'm going to explain this just a little bit more in a moment, but really this is a tool to help make gradual progress, because I know several people, I don't know all of you, but I know several people that have joined us today. And I know you're wearing a lot of hats. I know you got a lot on your plate. I know your intentions are good. And I'll tell you this, it gives you a lot more confidence if you're making progress. And one of the biggest things I've learned actually in the last 6 to 9 months is that putting this together in a plan. And if you look at this as being a 13-quarter plan, and every single quarter you're doing something to move it along, you're going to find yourself moving forward to the point where your business is ready, you're ready, and the buyer's ready, but you need a structure to it. And that's what I love about our 13X quarter planner, which basically gives you 12 quarters, which is 3 years, plus an extra quarter to get yourself succession ready. Don't forget to also join us on Wednesdays for Lightbulb Moments, 10 a.m. Central Time. Also, you can listen to the podcast or the YouTube. And like I said, this is also a place where we profile great succession stories. We give updates, etc. With that, I want to thank you for joining us today, and I'm going to see the chat if there's any questions. All right, so we're going to open it up for some Q&A here. Any comments are welcome. Comments, questions, etc. Especially after you spend 30 minutes just talking. It's nice to have a response. Yes, see you in Austin. Shareholders, your thoughts. I would love to unpack that one. I mean, I love shareholders, and I don't know a little more in the question. If you get a chance to type it in there. If there's other questions, let me know. And reminder, do join us next week. It's going to be a special session on valuations. I'm going to give the chat just a couple more minutes, and then we'll formally wrap this up. Oh, I guess there is a question there. Oh, thank you, Inez. Great info. I appreciate it. Yes, thank you, Desmond. All right, we're going to wrap it up today. I certainly do hope you found this valuable. And I'm going to continue to do this. And okay, I do see the question here. Looking to have key employees become shareholders for buyout. I stay C. I love that. I love the comment. Looking to have key employees become shareholders versus full buyout. I stay CEO. That is a formula that has worked. It can work. Like everything else, it has its pros and cons. But I'm a 2 thumbs up on it, especially because I know the owner and I know how competent you are, how great you are at your communication. So I think that probably could work in your case. All right, everybody. I think we'll wrap this thing up, and I hope to see you next week. Spread the word. I'd love to have as many people participate in these webinars as possible. I think this information is so important for the industry. It's a joy to do it. It's especially a joy to do it when you take your precious time with us. Thanks again, and we'll see you very soon.